Hello, my name is Joshua Boyd, and today I'll be presenting about my internship in the Coastal Redwood Project with Michelle Geary, as well as my participation in the Native Garden at West Valley College. Best way I could think of doing this. So the Coastal Redwood Project is... The question of the project and the goal of it was to find out, can coast redwood seedlings survive reduced fog and climate change in California? There was a need to gather more data in different populations, looking at seedling distribution patterns and measuring microclimate variables. My part in this project was to source seedlings, firstly, just over 50, getting them from a wholesale nursery called Lone Pine Gardens, and that was in Northern California near one of these sites called Pepperwood, where there was going to be a planting, and it was important to make sure we get seedlings from a similar area, and I ensured they were collected locally. Next was to build structures, because my whole part of the project was to monitor the seedlings as they grew, but also what we were trying to find out from my section of the project was how the seedlings reacted to different amounts of sunlight. So we built structures of pallet tables using pallets and other sorts of wood, and used shade cloth, different levels of shade cloth, 25, 50, and 75%, and had 3 different redwood seedlings underneath each of those. And yeah, the ones in the sun, as it turned out, didn't do so well. Those were the first deaths that did occur. Weirdly enough, I was very excited to see those first deaths. It just seemed like a part of the project that was bound to happen, and I was just excited for the next step of the project. So it was strangely exciting when the first one went. So my main participation in the project, after we had potted the seedlings up in the larger containers, because as you'll see in the photos that I can jump ahead here, they started out in very small containers, 2-inch, 3-inch containers. And then they were potted up into these larger ones, 1-gallon containers, which are substantially taller, about 8 or 10 inches tall. So I tended to them, and you can see the shade structure here as well. Different shade cloths. This was the south side where the sun came in the strongest, so that part was left open, and then the shade was on the northern side because that's where the shade was going to be anyway. I also did participate in some site visits, monitoring a few plantings and checking on them. I didn't get to do that as often as I would have liked to, working full-time as well, but just one of the more thrilling parts as well. So that's a more close-up photo of the 1 gallon, and that's how much growth rate you can see has happened between this, which was 2 inches maybe, and they started growing very tall. And this is our example of the monitoring data sheet. See these refer to north gap, south shade, and other such things, and we were monitoring their growth. This is us potting them up. That's me. And after they were potted, looking very proud of myself. Ourselves, excuse me. The Native Garden Project. In order to just supplement some hours and really just kind of a passion project for me, I decided I wanted to take the West Valley College Native Garden, which was built by park management students. I thought it could use a bit of a refresh. It seemed that some of the plants in some areas were vastly overgrowing their beds. Excuse me. And even though it is a native garden, intended to represent the different native Californian species, there was some, it was mostly the Bay Area, but still across the whole state. And yeah, it had become a little overgrown. And I am myself a gardener. I have been a professional gardener for a few years now. I have had experience in nursery work. For over 6 years, I worked at a nursery in the Bay Area, learning how to take care of plants, both native as well as ornamental. And that allowed me, honestly, to learn so much about native species. It was really great. As well as working park maintenance for a season with the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and that again helped teach me how to maintain native species, as well as again my experience gardening the past few years, which kind of those two added up to the gardener. I felt like gardening when I moved up to the Northwest was it was an opportunity that came up, and it seemed like a good combination of nursery work and park maintenance. I also do have quite a bit of experience in native habitat restoration, removing invasive species, planting native species. Excuse me. So, some before and after photos. You can see I just highlighted some main areas, some bigger beds that I did. There were other cuts that I made. But Mattia poppy, Romnea coulterii, a cane grower. Romnea can get huge. If any of you, if any of the park management students have taken the kind of shortcut to the back of the room, you'll know it. There are 3 of them, and they're huge, and they were all this big, just giant. And you can see it had gone to seed. That's what all those are, just seed pods out there. They don't really settle out too much out there, but they just create a mess. And almost so much of it on the inside was just dead sticks sitting in there. That's what all that brown in the background you can see is. With cane growers, what you want to do is you remove the older canes to allow the younger canes to flourish. And that next year bloom will just be even bigger, because it was able to just get so much more sunlight and so much more air into those spaces that were so condensed before. Doing this is eventually going to cause just issues in the root crown and everything. So I went ahead and started cutting. Usually I allow myself an annual budget of 30% when making cuts on a plant, but with a cane grower, and especially one like this, you can cut pretty hard, which I did. To all 3, you can see how much they shrunk, and that's all fresh green growth. All those twigs down at the bottom are all brown. And so, yeah, fantastic. So the next area was kind of in the center of the garden, and there's a coast live oak sitting there surrounded by a California grape. Now, the coast live oak was growing well, but that grape was just going wild. The border of the bed is way inside here, and there was already another section of California grape on the other side of the bed, so I decided this seemed like a volunteer, as there was some sage and other stuff growing underneath. So I went ahead and removed all of it, making some cuts on the sage on the parts that had died beneath because of being covered by the grape. California grape is a native, but it's surprisingly not invasive, but spreading, and can choke out some plants if it is allowed to. So that's it after, completely cleared out. It's hard to tell because of the sunlight and the bright ground, but the edge of the bed is kind of right, honestly, on the rim of the shade of that tree right there. And again, they're harder to see, but there are some other sage plants, and I believe there's Artemisia in there as well. The third big bed area that I handled was this maple combined. There's a maple here, which is in the back of that one. There's a small coast live there as well. And you can just see all the California grape. I mean, it was just crazy, climbing all up into both trees. And actually, mostly just the maple. And you can see creeping along the concrete back there, way out into the pathways. So the first job was clearing that up, clearing a lot of suckers off the maple. There's some Baccharis back here, some coyote brush, which also was cut back just to allow some spacing between it and the trees, because that tree is going to get a lot larger, and pruning back branches can discourage root growth. So doing so can give that maple just a little bit more space to spread its roots out as it keeps going. And that's it after. Pushed back that grape because this was the other grape that I was talking about before. Still want that represented in this garden. I do think it's an important plant to show. You know, it's very few native California grapes. As far as I know, actually, it's mostly just the one. And you still want that represented there. So that was that complete one. And that's it. I hope there's not any questions because I'm not doing this live. And